But if you're on the other side of that, where maybe you're selling a lower cost item, or maybe you're not seeing that traction straight away, you might get 30 leads, and of those, 10 of them are happy for a coffee, and of those, 2 of them say yes. But what does the branding mean for you? And then what does it say about you if you're not there?
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr. I'm filling in for Jeb Blount Sr. And today we have an amazing guest, a great friend of one of our contributors on Sales Gravy University, Mr. Tony Morris. She is a sales thought leader, travels around the world doing some really great keynotes, great thought leadership, and sales mentorship for her clients, and we're really excited to have her all the way from Australia. So we talked about time zones this morning. Things are all off. It's going to be a fun Sales Gravy podcast. But before we get started, I want you to check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the most powerful sales training platform on the market for sales professionals. 45 plus contributors, including people like Tony Morris, and we've got Mike Weinberg, and we've got Victor Antonio, and so many others that are contributing their sales knowledge to you through Sales Gravy University. 1,000 plus hours of on-demand sales training content that you can deploy very easily for an entire team through your LMS system and for yourself if you're an individual. And then we also have live training that you can sign up for. They're small group classes, easy to join up for, and really understand how you can make your sales day better and take it to the next level. So check out Sales Gravy University. That's learn.salesgravy.com. If you haven't taken a class before, use the code podcast and get a free course right now for free. That's podcast at checkout, and you can get a free course for free. All right, Harriet, I want to ask you a couple questions, and I think that you have some really interesting ideas and thoughts on the sales world as it pertains to especially SaaS and enterprise selling, but also you've built incredible pipelines. I mean, your tagline is $1.6 million pipeline in 6 weeks. So you've got a lot of firepower in what you do. And you brought up, you were at CyberCon. Is that okay? You were at CyberCon, which is a great conference, and you brought up an interesting question. How do you track ROI in events on trade shows? And we do trade shows. We have our own trade show, or we have our own conference that we run. And for sales professionals who get sent to these shows, and even those who are sponsoring these shows, you ask a few really interesting questions. So I kind of want to get your initial lay of the land of why this was something you were contemplating, and then we can dive into some of the deeper questions.
Yeah, sure. I think that the topic comes up because you're battling between marketing and sales all the time. Marketing are pumping money in, sales team are going, they're ready, they're drinking, they're having a really wild time. Everyone comes back, they're like, that was the best conference I've ever been to. And then marketing are like, well, we've got 92 leads, and of those 92 leads, now you need to go and convert them, otherwise we're not doing it next year. And the conversation came up in somebody in marketing and somebody from another vendor at the conference. And we were all kind of just chatting away around this topic. And for me as a salesperson and training sales, it's very hard to look for the ROI initially or straight away, because as you would have seen on some of those comments, has been that, some people will close a deal 20 months later. But they met at CyberCon, they had a great conversation, they were able to start, learning more about their business. And then it took them, 18 months to configure a deal, to find the right time, to be, within the right contract time, to then be able to go through and do it. So, how are we tracking? Are we okay with a 20-month ROI? And was that deal then significantly big enough to warrant us going again? Because if it costs you $50,000 or $100,000 to attend, which is often some of these amazing booths cost, and your flights and your people, then sometimes you might be able to close one deal that's, $500,000, depending on what you're selling. And then you go, sweet, done. It was worthwhile. We'll go again next year. But if you're on the other side of that, where maybe you're selling a lower cost item, or maybe you're not seeing that traction straight away, you might get 30 leads, and of those, 10 of them are happy for a coffee, and of those, 2 of them say yes. But what does the branding mean for you? And then what does it say about you if you're not there? And I think that's just a really fun kind of conversation to kick it off when we're talking about ROI around such events.
And you're right, because it's difficult to measure the ROI of brand awareness or presence, or the person who walked by your booth, but 15 months from now was looking for the solution, and they just remembered the booth because it was so great, or they talked to somebody, or they got a brochure and it sat on their desk, or maybe they just signed up for your emails and they just got emails over and over and over again. They just, I got 15,000 emails that I do not delete because I don't even have the time to like get them out of my inbox. I just like ignore them and triage them. So that's an interesting conversation. Well, from a sales perspective, that you're a salesperson, and you're not necessarily responsible for the P&L, right? But you get sent to an event and you've got, say you talk to 15 leads, you document 15 leads, and you put them into your CRM. What are your tactics? How do you start to convert these, even if they're not the right time? How do you even keep them, 20 months down the road? How do you even keep them on the leash a little bit so that you can have those conversations when it matters? Like you have lots of these conversations because you go to a lot of conferences. What are some of the tips and tactics that you teach people?
Yeah, so we actually now offer a service which is lead development, and we take on a lot of the leads now from events. So I can share some insights of those, but I can also share, obviously what we do as well, and from our business side. But from the lead development element that's for all vendors, organizations that are doing these follow-ups. And my rule of thumb is 8 touch points, and then you park it for 12 weeks, and then you go again. Now, that can feel like a lot if you don't know what you're doing. So if you're, most salespeople will send an email, and then they will then maybe find you on LinkedIn, and then they might send you a second email if you're lucky. And if we're really lucky, they pick up the phone. And so that's 4 touch points sporadically. There's probably no method to their madness. And then it goes into this, that gets lost in the 18,000 other leads you've got in the CRM and never to be seen of again. And so what's happening is that we haven't done a good enough job of that one lead that was generated from an event. And we've emailed them, hey, it was great to meet you. And it maybe was a bulk email. And then the salesperson's done nothing with it, or the SDR's done nothing with it. And so we teach that from what we do is we follow an 8 touch point sequence. We do that on behalf of organizations. And then we hand it back to them either at the end of the term. Usually organizations stay with us for a longer period, but we can then hand it back at the term. And then we say, this is what we recommend doing next. Now, for the way I do it is that if I was doing it and I'm responsible for these leads, I'm making sure the notes are in there, making sure that there's intel and data, and even small pieces. And this is why I can always tell when it's ones I've taken if I've gone on behalf of a client. I can always see because it's got, talked about their dog, or, grabbed a beanie and talked about that where he's going next week is going to be really cold. So I'm gathering that data because it's so important, because then when I pick up the phone, because I'm not emailing because I can't be bothered, then I ring them and say, hey, it was so great to chat to you at the event. How was your hiking trip? Did the beanie come in use? Did you win the F1 tickets? How was the rest of your event? None of that is to do with me selling you anything. Then the question I move into is then, awesome, I know we had a quick chat about insert technology, and keen to know a bit about where that lands. And at the moment, we're end of 2024. It's great to then say, what's your plans for 2025? It feels relaxed. It doesn't feel like I need you in and I need a meeting and then I need to know what you're doing. And so they then usually will give me a bit more around, look, it's definitely on the agenda for next year, probably second half of next year. Awesome. Cool. So what's your discovery process like? What does it look like? And that falls in really nicely. Whereas if we don't have any data, and I've worked with lots of data where we've got nothing, and it's like full attendee list, and you got to love those as the salesperson, and you're going through it and you're like, well, did we meet them? Did they come to the booth? Did they attend a session? Did they, access some data? So my phone call is always then, hey, it was, I believe we may have crossed paths. And I go about it from that perspective. And I'm like, I believe we crossed paths at, CyberCon. We didn't get a chance to say hello. How was the event? Then it then falls in, because then if they didn't go, they're like, oh, do you know what, I didn't make it. I'm like, oh, well, that that makes sense. That's why we didn't get a chance to say hello. Or if if they did go and they're like, well, who are you and what booth you were on? We're like, oh, we were next to the coffee stand, and we were well caffeinated that day, weren't we? It's using those examples of things that are not necessarily about the sales offering or about the technology, but it's about having those touch points and knowing that and I guess really having that cadence that says activity, activity, activity. HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive all allow you to do that, and it's about using it.
And so from the marketing perspective, you have insight into this. Leads
Mhm.
from an event, a conference, CyberCon, that end up in your camp, right? are they what is the percentage conversion comparatively to a Zoom info cold list, cold list,
Mm.
comparatively to maybe warm leads that came through like organic into a CRM system. What are you seeing, and I guess justifying this from the marketing perspective is also, since we're having both conversations, I want to have both.
Yeah.
What are you seeing from your efforts helping other organizations do this?
Okay, so I've got my two hats on. So I think with regards to the event leads and then the inbound organic, and this could also we could probably also incorporate any downloads of resources or white papers, those sorts of things as well. They're warm. You will have a higher conversion, and I would say within a longer period of time, because you're remembering we're dealing with people that we don't know when their term is. We don't know where we are in their cycle. We don't know, have they just bought something and we're now 3 years out, whatever that may be. So we can't really manage that. But I know that the leads that we deal with that come from an event or from a download or from a roundtable, we have conversations. We're on about 80% of conversations
Mm,
are accepting. Like,
mm.
they're acceptable. They're happy to have a chat, and we've got more to talk about because it's not just, hey, you inquired about my service. It's like, you came. Did you see the session? How was the weather? Where did you travel from? We've got so much to talk about. So I think for me, anything that involves more data, more information, and where we can use like almost the moment or the surrounding wins. The cold list, you've got to be consistently persistent.
Mm.
And in that realm, you will then start to see, more traction and, more opportunity to drive through. It will just take you longer unless you are right place, right time.
I think that's the perfect analogy right there. You got to be it's got to be persistently persistent, consistently persistent. There we go. On a cold listen, and what we work with sales teams all over the world, and we have events and they do events, and we don't run this kind of service for organizations ourselves, but you know the conversion rate, you have to have a good mix there. You have to have good conversations, and it's easier to have conversations with people who have been just in the same place as you. Even if if you went to Orlando, or you went to Adelaide, or you went to London, and you were talking with folks who were in London. How was the weather? It was terrible. Right? So
Yeah.
you're gonna have, it's an easier way in. Oh, we had great experiences. We saw this session versus the cold call, which is of course is cold. So you have barely anything to talk about other than the value that you're bringing. And so, I think for the marketing side, spending a lot longer developing prospecting sequences, and developing the pipeline from prospecting cold lists can be worth it in the long term. But events may be a great way to put some juice into your team. It's the end of the year. Maybe pick one event at the end of the year, even if it's $50,000 or $100,000. You may close 5 deals from it in the future, but those deals were a lot easier to close just by, proximity and ease of conversation. Um, you you now are moving into a place where, okay, you're having these conversations, you're helping businesses have these conversations, you're putting things into the pipeline, and you're prospecting, hopefully, and you're doing all you're picking up the phone and you're calling people, hopefully, and not emailing, and now you've got a ton of opportunity, right? You've got several opportunities in the pipeline, and you've got a lot of deals to work on. You've got data to go get. You've got proposals to make. You've got meetings to have. Which, of course, if you're like me and you who work in a smaller kind of business, I've got several hats I'm wearing. So it's not just sales. It's marketing. It's operations. It's product. It's everything that we do. How do you balance multiple opportunities? This is something that you talked about in LinkedIn, by the way. So if you haven't followed Harriet on LinkedIn yet, go and do that. But what are your strategies for balancing a lot on your plate?
I think using your CRM is like my number one. Figure out how to use it. As part of any of our onboarding training we do is always go and spend some time in YouTube or in the university, component of your CRM, because there's so much more in there that you don't know. And even when you think you know it all, there's still something more that that will improve your day to day. And I think that as well, then that communication piece and knowing what's happening next. So what happens in a lot of deals, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is that people will go into a conversation, they'll find an opportunity, and they'll say, look, especially at the moment, come back to me in January. Let's chat again in the new year. And what most salespeople do is they'll say, yeah, that's fine. Awesome. I'll give you a call in the new year. Whereas I'm like, no, get the date, get the time, confirm it now, because it's going to be really hard again to grab them. So at least then you know what's happening, because that means then at the end of that meeting, I say, awesome, let's chat. You're back in January. Let's push it to the end of Jan. I've popped in half an hour. You can tell me a bit more then, and we'll work the rest out from there. It means then that I know that's in my calendar. I don't need to think about you again. My notes are in my CRM. I know what we're going to talk about. So when my call pops up and I'm like, Jeb Blount Jr., what am I talking to him about? I can go straight into my CRM, pull up the notes, and it's like, right, we've got our 30-minute call, off we go. Whereas if then we've got to come back in January and we've got an empty book, and this can come from a holiday, it can come from a long weekend, it can just come from the fact that you cleared out your pipeline and now there's nothing else to work on. It feels much harder to get going again. And so I think having that consistent around that next meeting, never get off the call or meeting without one. That for me then will solidify what I'm doing. And I'm never going to wake up in the morning and be like, I was meant to call them on this date or time. It's already there. And I think then the other side of it is that we use a project management tool within our organization, and we know our team's growing. And so now we've got people with different responsibilities. So it's not, it isn't always everything has to fall down to me. But the project management system now, we use Asana. It's free. It's great. And it allows us to manage the team. So we've got all of our projects. So we know, what's going on with our podcast, what's going on YouTube, what's going on LinkedIn, what's going on with our client management. And all of that then plays in there. And I think for me, it's about having those regular touch points, those regular meetings. Our Monday morning meeting, we use a scorecard to track lots within the business as well. And I think that for me has been a real game changer.
How do you know when to reduce the amount of opportunities that you're working and try and rein it in a bit when you have excess, and you can you don't know when. I can't tell you exactly when it is, but you know it when you feel it. And your hair is starting to stick out a little bit more, and exactly, and the CRM notes they're just not doing it for you anymore because you're not able to put in enough information. So you're going into every meeting just hoping and praying that you get it exactly right, and it's just not going to happen. So, kind of, when you get to that point, how do you start to reduce to move faster?
So for me, I would say I would then look at the quality of the leads that are coming through, because often, if you think about when everyone starts out, I'm talking for myself here. I was like, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll work with that person. Yes, I'll do that weird service that we don't currently offer, but we'll throw it in.
I've never done that. I've never done that. I'm talking to my bosses. I'm talking to everyone that I've ever worked for. I've never done that before, ever.
Never.
Anyways, continue.
Lies. I think that so for me, I'll look at the type of lead, and the same thing goes if we start getting an influx of inbound. I will just put a lead form in the middle of that and go, right, well, let's increase the barriers, because it means then we start gathering the data. So it means we're now getting warmer leads into our plate. If we know then we're cutting off some of the other ones, can we get someone else to maybe help us with some of the calls? The other thing I would do is I would push out the calls to later on in the year. So if someone's like, awesome, can we chat next week? I would say, look, my next availability now is looking like the 5th of February onwards. And when are you looking to get something like this implemented? And it means then we cut straight through to be saying, look, I'm in demand. This is where we're currently at with our survey, with our availability just to chat. When do you need something in? And what usually happens is they're like, well, I need it in by Feb. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, look, let me just check the schedule. If I can get it in through Feb, I will squeeze you in. But if it was for April, then I say, well, look, let's still do Feb. I've still got availability for you in April. Are you happy to have that conversation then? And so I think it does two things. One is it indirectly then says, well, I'm really busy, and if you want to work with me, and we're really good, and so you're going to have to wait a bit longer. But what it will also do, which you don't always want, is it will go, well, I want it now. Like I'm prepared to pay. I'm here. I'm ready. And so then you go, well, look, I'm happy to squeeze you in. I'll do a 9 p.m. slot for you, and I'll do something else for you because you need it. I want to work with you, and you're my ideal client. So that for me is how I would do it, is just push it out. A lot of people I see will say, unfortunately, we're not available, or unfortunately, we're really busy at the moment, or unfortunately, I'm like, there's nothing unfortunate about this. It's great for us. It's great for them because they're going to see we're in demand and that they should really want to work with us. And for us, there's really no downside.
I love that. I actually want to spend a little bit of time on this. I haven't used it well because I'm the kind of person who is, hey, like I got an email yesterday morning at 7 a.m. and the guy said, he emailed me, I don't know, 3 weeks ago and said, hey, do you have availability for a keynote in January? And of course I emailed him back like, let's talk about it. Let's set something up. He didn't get back to me at all. And then 3 weeks later, he emails me, hey, do you have time this afternoon? It was 7 a.m. My personality type is like, yeah, I got time. I got time this afternoon. I'm like getting in my calendar. I'm trying to figure out exactly when I can fit him in. I'm doing like the matrix math on my calendar. But I like your method, and it challenges something that has, at least for me as a younger person in business, and you as well, I'm sure, as a younger person in business, is that customer service is so immediate. Everything's immediate. We get everything in our life immediately, and so we have this weird stress, and I don't know if it's real or not. I actually don't think it is. But customers, like if they email me, I assume that if I don't email them back within like an hour, I've lost the deal. Like they're done. They think that I'm at like a terrible sales rep, that they'll never get customer service from our business ever. Like I've ruined our brand. And so if I don't immediately jump on it, I'm going to be in a bad way. But what you're saying is, no, like you are busy. You have lots of opportunity. You have lots of things in your pipeline. Qualify it even faster than getting on a call with them and say, I am booked pretty much full until X date. When are you looking to get this done? If they say, well, we were just looking into it, right? If we're just poking around and getting some information, we have no end date. Perfect. Why don't we meet 2 months from now when I have my calendar available and I'll be able to give you all the information? Or if they say, I want to get it done 2 weeks from now, you can go, this might be priority. Do you have, are they're willing to at least have that real conversation with me? Sure, I can get you in on Thursday at whatever time. So instead of,
Mhm.
you have only 2 p.m. open on Thursday and immediately filling it with something that some who's probably never going to buy from you, you qualify them immediately. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful. And what's the language that you use around that? Just repeat it again. And your accent makes it so much better, but
I think in that scenario is always in just clarifying that. So if somebody's coming through saying, so use your example, we want you to do a keynote in January, and you go back and say, awesome, yeah, can do that day. When are you free to chat? Book something in here. I'm available next week or available 2 weeks from now. And then if they then don't come back, I would park it, or I would then maybe send another email, because if it goes into your CRM, you automatically put your follow up in, and then in that follow up, it then says, "Hi, I've not heard anything back. Just confirming if this date is still, if this is still the preferred date. And as we're getting a little closer now, I only have a couple of options available. We'll need to secure this by end of week if you would like to proceed." So that way, then that kind of rounds that one off. Using the example I gave before, is that if somebody wants to have a meeting and I'm like, I'm at capacity, and the example now, I'm going back to the UK next week, so I just need to work on my accent, ready to go back to mum and dad next week. And so when I'm, I know my cutoff is Thursday. And I am like you, I have this, the calendar matrix, and I'm getting like messages now being like, hey, it was great to see you at CyberCon. And when are you free for a chat before Christmas? And I'm like, before Christmas? Okay. Tell me a bit more about what you're looking to talk about, and let me see if I can fit you in. Otherwise, it's looking likely for around these dates. And I also use proximity in that realm as well. If somebody wants something, I can then say, well, look, I'm actually going to be in that area on these dates. If you'd like to have a conversation around that, I can book you in for January. If they then come back and say that's not a right fit, well, you're looking for something sooner. If so, I'll fit you in. If not, should we keep it as that date? And at least then we've got time to play. And it's really about communicating between, you want something, I want to do that something with you, but now we've just got to find a way that works for both of us.
and I like that you mentioned in a few minutes ago, your first explanation of this. Take out the word unfortunately. Unfortunately, and Jeb Senior talks about this by the book AI Edge. Just shameless plug, but he talks about this word unfortunately a lot inside of our business, not so much with clients, but actually with us internally. And he says nothing good comes after unfortunately. So whoever you're talking to, customer facing, customer success, if it's customer service, if it's sales, if it's account management, when you send unfortunately, the person's brain pattern, recognizes patterns, automatically knows it's negative. It puts them in a negative space. Where when you come from a place of authority, from scarcity, like you have demand, so there's scarcity there. Your language around this was, I am booked, but I'd love to work with you. So is this something you want to implement now or later? Because I don't have any time now unless it is urgent. And then it sparks that, I do want to move on this now. They're drawn to it rather than away from it. When you say, unfortunately, I'm so busy right now. If you're trying to be nice, I think it's from a good place in your heart. It's just it doesn't hit the same on the other side as you want it to. So I just love that was beautiful. If you go back and listen to this, implement this into your life, and take the word unfortunately out, and come from a place of authority, and don't think from a place of high demand. Like you are in high demand, and it'll help. Also, if your pipeline's full, it tends to give you a little bit more power, right?
It does. It makes you feel better, so that when you're looking at it, you're like, "Well, it's pretty full in there. We'll be fine." For a few extra weeks or months, and before I need to start worrying too much.
Would you recommend? A question for you: would you recommend this if you don't have a full pipeline? Say you're looking at January, the second week of January. I think it's January 8th. Holidays happen. By the way, when you go back to the UK, do your parents rib you a little bit for not having the accent that you had when you left? Is that something that you experience?
Yeah, well, my mum will say, "Oh, you sound very Australian," and I'm like, "I don't think I sound Australian at all." But when I'm training, and when I'm training, because I train obviously a lot of Australians, they don't understand me if I don't go up at the end of my sentence, and so I have to add in the little Australian twang to get me, to get them to relate to me. But then whenever I speak to Australians, they're like, "You're so English," and then when I go home, everyone's like, "Oh, you sound a bit Australian." So by the end of it, I sound really English again, and then I come back and I'm like, everyone sounds really Australian.
Yeah, well, us Americans, we can't tell the difference. You're back with your holiday season. You're with your parents. You're enjoying family time. Maybe you didn't close all your deals before. Be positive, right? You close all your deals before the end of the year, and you're getting into 2025 on a fresh slate. But you didn't follow up on those conversations. You have a whole week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks even, without any meeting set up. Would you recommend that framework if someone comes to you, or you're maybe even you're prospecting and they are interested and they want to set a meeting with you? Do you say something like, I'm booked for the next couple of weeks? Is this something that you are looking into in the short term or in the long term, and still having that conversation from a place of authority, though your pipeline is empty or your calendar is empty? Or do you, at that point, do you just say, like, take anything you can and do your best?
Please let me do this. So I would say not to lie. If you're not busy and you want to seem busy, I always think there'll be holes somewhere that will throw you out, and then you'll be like trying to claw it back. So if then somebody reached out to me, let's say that first week of Jan, and they wanted to chat, my goal would then be, let's get them on the call as quickly as possible. So awesome, thanks so much for your inquiry. We can absolutely help you. And that's probably my little tip. Always say you can help them. Refer back to to what it is that they actually want, and then link back to how you can help. We would love to be able to help you. We can absolutely help you with this. Why don't we jump on a call? I've got good availability Thursday afternoon or Tuesday morning. I would never do it for the same day. Even if I was desperate, I would never do it for the same day, because then it shows them that I'm desperate. The only moment would be is if they say, look, we want to get something in as soon as possible. When would you be free to speak? I would say, look, I've actually got an availability today at 2. Otherwise, I can do Thursday at 8. So it means then that you're giving them options based on what they've said that they need. And then we're able to then bring it through. The qualification then comes in as to how soon do you need it, what do you need, all your usual qualifying questions around why and outcomes and what you've done previously. And then we can then obviously secure it in and move them through your sequence. If somebody inquired and then didn't come back to you, I would wait 2 or 3 days and I'd call them. I got your inquiry. I just want to make sure my email came through okay. It might be easier for us to maybe book it over the phone. We've both got our calendars open. How are you set for Tuesday? It's just about having the confidence or the clarity in what we're going to say next. And then being able to then go, well, look, I'm trying to make your life easier as the prospect. So all the language I'm using is, I would love to help you. How about we get that worked in? When are you free? Let's check our calendars. It feels a lot more easeful than being, back forth, or using links. And some people like a link, and I don't mind a link, but I don't love a link. So I feel like it's always about that communication piece.
I agree. Okay, so last question, and we're gonna get you out of here. Is hashtag FUF, hashtag FUF. I just wanted to say it. I think it just sounds funny. Follow up Friday. You've been doing this for a decade. I'm intrigued. It's a quick tip. Walk us through hashtag FUF.
What is a FUF? We have to get up on the FUF. So the hashtag FUF actually came from my husband. Like, he started using it on a Friday morning in a text, and he was like, hashtag FUF. And I was like, right, we're going to bring this out. So Follow Up Friday for me has always been something I do every Friday as a salesperson. Friday mornings were get my coffee. I'd usually treat myself to some form of sweet muffin, and I'd get back to my desk and I would go through my deals pipeline. I would go through all the meetings I've had. I would be like, where's my holes? Like, who hasn't come back to me? Who was meant to, email me back? Who was meant to come on a call but didn't? And then I've emailed them and they've not come back. And I would just get my mobile and I would just be constantly following them up. And the reason why I found Fridays was that everyone was in a good mood. Now, in Australia, very similar, I think, to other parts of the world as well, but in Australia, especially summer, it's hot and lunchtime comes and the pub's calling, and especially in tech, everyone's at the pub. So I would have between, 8 a.m. and, lunchtime-ish to get through these calls. So I would spend my whole morning, just a quick follow-up. I would send my value. So my value is where I piece that in during my 8 touch points, which is saw this and thought of you. And it might be a webinar, it might be a podcast, it might be nothing to do with my service, but it's just we've had a chat, we've talked about dogs, here's a funny dog video for a Friday. It could be as basic as that. But my follow-ups were done. I caught people on a good moment. I wrapped out the week. So my end of week, my pipeline looks good. My inbox looks good. I can now go to the pub and join the rest of the gang and enjoy my weekend, and then come back in on a Monday with a clear slate. I know what I'm doing. My meetings are booked in. It also is the last opportunity to fill any gaps over the next 2 weeks, because I would always work 2 to 3 weeks ahead, so that I never had any gaps. And it meant if I was going on leave, I can manage that as well. So my Friday is always my hashtag FUF, Follow Up Friday. It's just a good one of a Friday morning on the phone, get through, anyone that's dropped off, that's your moment, grab it, run with it, end the week on a high.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you joining the Sales Gravy podcast. Hang on for just a moment. We're going to give you an opportunity to share where to find you, what to look for, because you need to be following Harriet. But before we get there, check out Sales Gravy University. I mentioned it earlier. Use the code podcast. Get a free course right now. Sales Gravy University. It's learn.salesgravy.com. Learn.salesgravy.com. Harriet, tell us where we can find you, where we can follow you, where we can learn about what you do for the sales world, so that companies and people can start really understanding how to elevate their game.
Thank you. Definitely on LinkedIn. You've shared that a little bit throughout today. So LinkedIn, just search Harriet Mellor or search Your Sales Co. We've got a podcast which is Sell Like You, and then we've got the Your Sales Co channel on YouTube as well.
I love it. Harriet, thank you so much for joining us on the Sales Gravy podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.